Okay, ready to dive into part one? It's all about resetting how you think. To me, this is one of the most foundational sections of the whole book. And one of the things that when you understand how to reset how you think, that you end up having more control over your career than you ever thought was possible. So let's dive into the first lesson. As I said, we're going to go fast, but make sure you have your workbook. And at any time that you need to take a little more time, just put me on pause. I'll still be here. We talk about knowing your core powers. This is really all about knowing what you control. And as I mentioned in Red Cape Rescue, and if you've been following me for a while, you know that there are three things that each of us control. You control everything you think, you control everything you say, and you also control what you do. Everything you say, everything you think, everything you do. And you know what? That's it. You can't control anything else or anyone else. But in the end, it's enough. It's a lot. And so for you, as we dive into this first exercise, as you start your Red Cape Rescue, here's the first big question that I want you to spend some time on. What's the biggest thing that you're trying to control right now? Take out your workbook. I'm just going to give you just 30 seconds right here and write your answers down. Go. Judge yourself anytime that you're writing these answers. Whatever comes to mind is exactly what's supposed to come up for you right now. Let's go to the next question. Take a second and read what you wrote out loud. If you need to, again, pause this video, I'll still be here. Is that thing that you're trying to control really in your control? Is there something you can say about it, think about it, do about it? If it's not, if what you're trying to control isn't in your control, what could you say, think, or do differently? Just take 30 seconds and write down some ideas for yourself in your workbook. Go. Learning what we control and what we don't is one of those huge steps that you can make that in an instant changes how things look at your life at work. Let's move on to the next lesson here, which is related. It's around conquering the battle of the brain. You know the battle that I mean. And if you've read the book, you read some of the stories that I told around, why our brains are like they are. It's biological, but also why, there is that annoying voice in our brain and it keeps us small. It's not our hero. This is why we have to learn to talk back to it. And one of the ways that you can learn to talk back to it is to give it a name, is to be able to talk back to it. And in your toolkit, there's actually a whole chart of ways that you can talk back to your brain. That lizard part that's not really moving you forward, that part that, really just wants to keep you playing small. And we can't keep you playing small. So download the chart, what to say when you talk back to your brain. This can be so helpful when we get stuck, right? And we start to having these repetitive thoughts about, I should be doing this, or, why is this so hard? But learning how to talk back to our brain is a skill that once you learn it, you have it forever. All right, moving on to the next lesson. I told you we were going to go fast, but remember, take as much time as you need. I'll be here for you. The next lesson is to unveil your values. In the book, I talk about some of the situations where I've seen that, people were feeling in conflict with their organization, or maybe in conflict with somebody else, and recognizing that what that conflict really was all about was holding different values. It wasn't that someone necessarily was right or wrong. It just meant that the things that they valued were different. And so I think a lot of times, like, the idea of these values conflicting, or like hitting two keys on a piano at the same time. Individually, each are lovely, but you hit them together, kind of like if you're a 2-year-old pounding on the keyboard, that's not music, that's just noise. So, how do we start to decode our values so that we can unveil them and use them and have them be part of our GPS to find our next direction, to clarify the direction that we're on? Well, there's a chart in your toolkit called Decode Your Values. So I want you to go and get that now if you haven't gotten it already. Got it? Okay, good. So now I'm going to ask you to circle the 10 that feel most like you. And here's the trick. Don't overthink it. Don't judge it. Don't say, oh, well, I should want this one. No, just circle 10. Trust your gut. I'm going to give you a little bit of time. Go. Few more seconds. Got your 10? Good. All right. Now, let's narrow those down to 4. 4. Yes, just 4. Write them down. Go through that 10. What are the 4 that you wouldn't compromise on? The 4 that are the who you want to be, that reflect who you want to be, the hero you want to be. Again, don't judge them. Dive in, pick those 4. When your values are clear, your decisions get easier. It's so important as we think about resetting how we think. So now answer this for me. How are your collective values, the 4 that you named, showing up in your choices right now? Or maybe where are you out of sync? Take a minute in your workbook and write some of those notes down. tendency to get out of sync with our values, especially if something's not going quite right in our life at work. But knowing your values is going to get you back on track. If this is an area you'd like to spend more time on, again, press pause, keep doing the work. But if you're ready to move on, let's go to the next key lesson in this section of resetting how we think. And it is imagine positive intent. Imagining positive intent is such an important skill because the truth is, as you learned when you read about conquering the battle of the brain, that our brains overemphasize negative experiences and they underestimate positive ones. You've had this happen to you, right? You get an annual review and you hear, 5 good things and 1 thing to work on. And what's the thing that you go home and you wake up in the middle of the night thinking about? Yep, not the 5 things, the 1 thing. This is how we're made as humans. But you can override this. You can teach yourself when that human reaction comes up to assume positive intent. It's not about being a doormat. I tell the story in the book about the resistance that some of my clients put up when I challenge them to assume positive intent. Like, I know he's trying to make me look bad. But assuming positive intent doesn't mean that people are going to walk all over you. It means taking a beat, creating space to ask the magic question, what else could this mean? If you've ever answered an email too quickly and found out later you were wrong or there was more to the story, or if you've ever jumped to conclusions and then later had to backtrack out of it, you definitely want to start practicing assuming positive intent. So for you, here's your question. Write it down in your workbook. How might you need to think differently to assume positive intent the next time your buttons get pushed? Oh yeah, the button, that hot button that you have. Honestly, often that hot button goes back to your values. But right now, write down, however it makes sense to you. Bullet it out. Tell a little story. How might you need to think differently the next time your buttons get pushed to assume positive intent? Take a second, write that down. As it says in your workbook, the brain is always looking out for danger. Not everything is danger. And jumping to conclusions, that can be a killer for our careers, for our relationships, for ourselves. Let's jump to the next lesson, which is to listen to the whispers. This may be one of my favorites in the whole book, let alone in this section about resetting how you think. I tell the story in the book about how I wasn't listening to my whispers and how finally I recognized that all the time I had wasted, all the things that I could have made progress on, the things I could have done, the people I could have helped. So I don't want that to happen to you. The whispers, that good voice, not that lizard voice that you need to conquer, but that good voice, the voice is propelling you forward, the voice of the person that you aspire to be, you want to be. Those whispers demand action. We have to learn how to trust them. It's really interesting doing this work where so often we trust that negative lizard brain, right? It goes back to how the brain works. Those 5 things that are negative versus remembering the one that's positive. The lizard brain is louder. So we've got to talk back to it, and we've got to let the whispers get heard. It's like the quiet kid in the classroom. It's like, speak up more. Let me give you some space. Let me give you the time to formulate your thoughts. We have to learn how to trust those whispers. And trusting the whispers means trusting ourselves. That we know what our values are. We know only what we control. We know who we are. How about you? What are your whispers telling you? My bet is there's something that even made you pick up this book, or maybe made it be a book that someone said, "Oh, you've really got to read Red Cape Rescue. You've got to meet this coach, Darcy. I think there's something in it that's speaking to you." No matter what those whispers are, I'm so grateful that you're here. Take a minute. What are your whispers telling you? Write it down in your workbook. This is definitely an area where you might want more time. But trust your gut and answer this. What's the one action that the whispers are asking of me now? Because remember, the whispers demand action. If we don't feed them with action, they keep coming back. They hit us upside the head. What's the action your whispers are demanding for you? Write it down. If you're hesitating, don't. No one has to see this. This is absolutely for you. This is a chance for you to go deeper into some of the ways that you can start your Red Cape Rescue. Answer as honestly as you can, and I know your whispers will thank you for it.